All right, so good evening, everybody. Well, we have a small group tonight, but that means we can have a really targeted conversation as well, and we can just keep it more conversational. Um, but let me just share my screen. All righty. People can see that okay?
Yep.
All right, so yeah, so tonight I wanted to review some of the design patterns that we prioritized last time and get your feedback on them, what strikes you about them, if it seems like a good list that we've started to compile. And then we're going to talk about guiding principles, and I'm going to introduce some different case studies of different schools and share with you the guiding principles that were created for them. And then we're going to create a set of guiding principles together. And maybe we can just do it as one group here because we've got a small enough group. And then we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll do some sharing of blue sky aspirational ideas. And finally, we're going to do some bubble diagramming. So let's see. We have a small enough group that I think that for the double bubble diagramming, I'll just skip ahead here. Usually what we do is like in a group, I thought we were going to have about 18 people. So I thought we'd split into 3 groups. And these are going to be facilitated by our design members of our design team. And I thought one group could focus on a whole school diagram, the other group could focus on a classroom neighborhoods diagram, and the third group could focus on entry sequence and community access. But since we have such a small group, maybe what we should do is just keep it to a whole school diagram or a classroom neighborhoods diagram, and then compare notes. And the folks that do the whole school diagram can sort of think about that entry sequence part of it as well. So does that seem like a good approach? So I guess what I would ask is for everybody that isn't on the design team, if you could just open the chat and tell us whether you want group 1 or group 2, and we'll try and give you your first choice, and but we want to spread it around a little bit. So if you want to focus on a whole school diagram, then just say group 1, and if you want to focus on the classroom neighborhoods, just say group 2 in the chat. Okay. Ooh, we've got a bunch of group 2. We need some group 1ers. Okay. All right. And then so we are tonight, we're really talking about key spaces and adjacencies, but we're also going to be doing some guiding principles, development, and whoops, wrong direction. And then I sent out the notes. I'll put them in the chat again from our last workshop. And then once we do the notes from this workshop, we'll put them together as a sort of consolidated set with a kind of an executive summary that will give you. I think that'll be really helpful, Molly, for your ed plan. Just to have, and some people actually include the notes as an addendum to the or an appendix to the ed plan, if you think that would be helpful. So in terms of design patterns, last time we introduced 36 different design patterns, and we had you kind of rate them in 2 different ways. If you remember, you did the thumbs up and the hearts in the bottom, and then you rated them on a scale, which ones were most important to you. So that's what we're calling top 10 design patterns 1.0. So what I did is I took all the thumbs up and the hearts, and I counted them for each design pattern. And then I have a formula where I look at how many people voted on each for the ratings. And that gives us kind of just a relative kind of sense of what's important to people. And so these were your top 10 design patterns that came up. And then we got into our small groups, and you all kind of prioritized again, talking about what was most important to you, and talking about some of the elements of those design patterns. So those are all in the notes. In terms of top 10 design patterns 2.0 from your small group, all the ones that are in red here appeared on the 1.0, just to see where the overlap is. So all of these top 4 and the extended learning spaces. So they all appeared when you were voting individually. So it's just always interesting to see what, what comes up about it. And all these, I mean, just to say that a lot of this is around making sure that we're just introducing ways for you to talk about space and a common language that we can all use to kind of talk about what's important. There's lots of overlap. We only did, we had a relatively small group that did this all, and there's not that much of a difference between the votes when you really look at them. So just, we got to take it all sort of in that light. But I'll just go through in terms of the small groups. What I did is since each group had 5 people in it, or roughly 5 people, for every time, and we had 4 groups we had 3 groups. For every time one of the patterns appeared on a small group list, I gave it 5 points. And so if it's 20 points, it means that it actually appeared on all 3 small group lists, plus there was probably some mention of one of these other ones, like teacher teaming or spatial synergy or something like that. So what I did is I put it in buckets because they're kind of connected to each other. So again, this is subjective, but not surprisingly, the academic clusters came up at the top, and I know people are interested in what those neighborhoods might actually look like and how they function. And that's connected to teacher teaming, building a sense of community and belonging, the synergy between spaces and making the school feel as small as possible, and also a grade configured with 6th grade on a different floor. That was mentioned as kind of a transition program.
David, do you mind if I ask?
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah, that'd be great. So Molly and Deb and Kevin, I'm not sure how much time, but so with Thurgood Marshall, I remember that it was really important to create these clusters. So that's risen to the top again. I know the clusters at Thurgood Marshall were pretty much like you got your own hallway. And at Pickering, maybe we want to think about having some gathering spaces for the cluster or morning meetings, stuff like that. But it's interesting to me, like, I guess, did we do it well? Are there things we could do better? But the idea of breaking this big school into a bunch of neighborhoods, right? Is that that's kind of one of that seemed to have risen to the top again?
Yeah, Dean, so that's really like the Association of Middle School model, is to create a smaller community in a larger school, because it supports the social emotional learning and the developmental stage of that early adolescence.
Right.
So it doesn't surprise me, because it is, it's just very appropriate for this.
Well, it also supports sort of cross-discipline kind of teaming, right? So that you have teachers that are at least in close proximity, and they may not be doing integrated projects necessarily, but some of them probably are. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And we used to, we had a middle school in Lynn years ago that had more of a junior high model with the departmental scheduling.
Right.
And she switched over the years, that principal switched back to a cluster model, because the students were not held by their cluster teachers, in the way that a cluster does. They kind of got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, you're cohorting adults and the students in a way that they get to know each other really well, and that they can see what's happened. So if Janie is not doing well in one class, and then her other teachers are talking to each other, they can figure out, wow, we need to figure out how to support her in this.
It definitely helps build relationships between the staff and the students, and like we've all been talking about, building community in their little areas too.
Right.
And Jean, to your point around like a common space within that small community, it would be nice if we could do it. Certainly it's going to come down to the configuration, but if in each cluster there was like a common multi-purpose space that could be used for either classrooms to do projects together and collaborate together, or even that the space could then also be used for teacher meetings or
Oh, Deb, you just cut out, so I don't know if you can hear me, but David has in the upper right of this slide, right, David, you have
Yeah,
kind of this cluster happens to have, well, living
yeah,
room
this
or
is,
a common space.
yeah, yeah. So this is the West Bridgewater Middle High School. Deb, I'm not sure if you can hear, but because you're still frozen. But here you can see a collection of classrooms and an extended kind of area in the hallway that's called a team room. And so that really creates a sense of community. And there's also here, there's a teacher planning area that's there. Did you hear that, Deb?
I don't even know if you heard anything that I
Yes,
said.
no, we heard what you said and then we started responding to you, but you were frozen. So we were
Oh,
just saying,
okay.
Jean was just pointing out that in this diagram here of West Bridgewater Middle High School, you can see that there is exactly that. Like there's this team room, that slightly extended area in the hallway. It's not a ton of square footage, but they did make a decision to take a little bit of square footage out of each classroom to put it into this extended area. And then there's a teacher planning area here,
Oh, okay.
and that creates a neighborhood,
All right. Yeah.
and
I
an
also,
area.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Just
go
wanted to
ahead.
put in that. So I work at Marshall and I do like the clusters, but I like how they have like the long kind of, they're all like in one kind of long hallway. Because I see clusters have cluster meetings and every kid in the whole cluster can like gather along the lockers in the hallway. And
Oh,
like one teacher, like they'll give awards to like clusters, and I love how they have that whole like long hallway for every single kid in the cluster to gather together. And they can do announcements. They can, say like things that are going well in the cluster. It's like a
yeah.
community gathering kind of, but they kind of line the hallways for it. And like everyone can clap for
But
everyone. they
Jessica,
can
would
award.
a space like this, which is much more, I mean, lining the hallways is a long linear thing, which it kind of gives you not the same sense of connection. If you could fit all the kids in that cluster in this room and do
If you can
announcements.
fit the whole cluster in that room,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would say it works, but that gathering space, if it could fit the whole cluster would be nice. But I just wouldn't want it to be too cluster around the corner, stuff like that. I just do like how all the classes are in one hallway so that they
Mhm.
can have a common place, unless you
Yes.
do have a big enough place for
Yeah.
them to
Well,
gather together.
maybe what that hallway just gets widened a little bit,
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
that's another approach.
Yeah, because maybe Jessica's saying, it would be great to have two classrooms together, doing a project, but really what's really nice is to have all 110 kids somehow in a
Yeah.
same space.
Yeah. It's interesting because I never thought of it that way. I guess the hallways must be relatively wide then in Thurgood Marshall, because I never thought of it that way as a hallway would kind of support that kind of group
They are
activity.
relatively wide and like the whole cluster kind of fits. It's cool.
Cool.
And I love seeing that because
That's
they do
great. Well,
awards and they do like cluster expectations. And it actually does feel like one community when they all kind of get together like that. So
Nice.
Let me ask you another question, because David has that pink space in his diagram, which is a faculty planning room. And we started with that at Thurgood Marshall. I remember walking through with David and he said, oh, it's too bad it's not more glass and, et cetera. But subsequently, you've had population increases and you've had to use those for classrooms, right? But to me, this seems like kind of cool. If you have all the kids plus all the teachers, then it seems like it's really truly a community. But I don't know, like, how do the teachers do planning since you're so overcrowded or you don't have those spaces?
they do it in their classrooms when it's their prep period. They'll just gather in
Yeah.
one classroom because all of our prep rooms were taken.
Well, what if I mean, this prep room is a relatively large one. It could be like a meeting room or a small conference room that would be a great place for teachers to meet while they, when they have the opportunity. And it would also be an extended learning area for kids if if they were doing some small group work and a teacher was able to monitor them.
Right, or a breakout
Something
space.
to think about that. Yeah. Okay.
Do you
Anyway,
think the prep
sorry to
rooms- do you
hijack.
think-
No, that's fine.
But this seems like it's.
This is all for you guys to talk through this with the folks who really can give you the feedback you need to start designing.
Yeah,
I do think the prep rooms are relatively large at Marshall, and I think that they were, when they were prep rooms, they were a little like too big, like it was kind of a little bit of a wasted space. That's my, and then they were big enough to become classrooms. And so, yeah,
Good.
If I, before we close out on this, I just want to add that if you were to create, like a community gathering space that could be used for multiple purposes, like with, temporary dividing walls, if you needed to do class in small group, that clusters could share those spaces, like, because clusters kind of organize their student of the month and they organize when they're doing announcements. So you would really only need that one space for even like 3 clusters. Like, it doesn't have to be that space for every single cluster because
Right.
they
Yeah.
organize around that.
right.
And you could really make a larger space that would
Right.
be like a multi-purpose room that a few clusters could share.
Exactly. And with like, movable, flexible seating, you could use that space regularly and then schedule or, sign up to
Yeah.
do like your monthly cluster meeting.
So I've been trying to turn on the transcribe function, and I can't. Usually I'm able to do it, but somehow it's not available. So I'm going to ask people to remember the things that you're saying, because when we get to the Mentimeter slide, I want you to write it down so that we can make sure to record these great ideas. Okay.
And David, I don't mean to hijack it, but agile classrooms is pretty simple.
Yeah.
Make all the furniture flexible and have some storage, and welcoming arrival, I think we can do. But the cafetorium and the multi-purpose space, being kind of the heart of the school. And Molly, I keep going to you because you were the principal and lived there. Like at Thurgood Marshall, I feel like the cafeteria was off to the side in its own separate wing, and maybe that's okay. But if people are identifying it being the heart of the school, I mean, is it a space that you would actually put more in the middle of the building? Or is that a little too literal?
Yeah, so if I may, it might be a little literal, Jean, because the nice thing about the convenience for other community members being able to sort of rent our space
Yeah,
is that it's like, it has its separate entrance and its separate security doorways. Where Thurgood Marshall is a Red Cross emergency, venue for flooding and hurricanes and things like that. And so it really, I don't know, I'm going to ask Jess, because Jess works with the life skills. So she has to walk her students down to the cafeteria and walk them back up. Do you feel, Jess, that the cafeteria is like a far away space?
I do like, I don't think I actually like the way that it is. I like it because I like how you can come in one door and kind of get to the gym and the cafeteria through one door and kind of block it off to the rest of the school. I think it's nice, like we just did a community fair this past Saturday, and it's nice to just have it in that, not in the main door, but in the other door, come in, the caf and gym are right there.
Yeah.
It is kind of a distance from my students, but if we were on the first floor, it would be better. I have a lot of issues with my students in wheelchairs that can't get down when the elevator's broken still this year. So
but I wonder. Sorry, just go ahead. Yeah, I wonder if it's either or though, because I mean we can still have it centrally located, but have the ability to block off whole sections of the school from that area when it is available, open to the public, right? Is that
like if the cafe, if you walked in the lobby, and I keep going back to Thurgood Marshall, right? Because you can picture it. So you walked into the lobby and the lobby opened right into the caf, and somehow you could, after hours, use the lobby, but you can't go anywhere else. I guess we did another school where you walk in and you kind of walk into the commons, and then the academic wings went off to the sides. And I'm not advocating either way, but if cafetorium is one of the priority design patterns, I guess I just wanted to get people thinking about it.
Although I can say, when it's like off to the side, there's a lot of traffic going back and forth to the CAF, like in that one hallway, kind of going from it's like all the academic clusters all feed through one hallway to the CAF. That's the worst, I think, in my opinion, the worst traffic hallway in the school.
Yep.
So that's a little iffy too, if they were kind of coming from both sides. I don't know if that would be better. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop, David.
All right. No, I think that, look, we have a small enough group that I think that this is actually very valuable. So as long as people are remembering their ideas, and then we'll record them. Moving along, security and welcome, also just kind of one of those givens. The extended learning spaces, which is what we were just talking about, those areas around which you may cluster classrooms, or the heart of school is also an extended learning space. The importance of being able to supervise it, a place to bring multiple classes together, the potential of supporting project-based learning, so maybe some storage and some flexible furniture, there's some obviously concern about freedom of movement if the spaces can't be monitored. So we need to make sure that there's eyes on those spaces. Special education also just kind of a given. And then indoor outdoor connections, we're certainly going to think about. So Gene, go.
Yeah, sorry. So push in special education. I guess I'd love to hear what spaces help for that. Is it just alcoves in the hallway? Is it separate rooms that are off classrooms? Is it like a conference room in each cluster? Like what's the best venue for most flexible or for doing that?
I'm an inclusion special education teacher, and something that would be nice is having some sort of area for each cluster. Right now, when I have to test, all of our students get tested in small groups. So a number of times I'm like on my third or fourth choice of a space that I can have people in, because classrooms that aren't being used may be being used for a cluster meeting or for PLC or I try to find a small room and there's another, sped group in there. And that's, before I was a special education teacher at Pickering, I never even thought of that as a thing. And it's having available space when we need it. And, I could have it, at least 2 times a day, depending on, I'm in the 2 ELA classes and 2 math classes. And, there's 1 inclusion teacher for each cluster. Some clusters have additional if they have like a climb group, which is, students with autism. So having like something that has desks that, maybe we can move out of the way, that it may be a room that, is dual, or the teachers can go do their planning and work together in there, but it can also be used for testing and for small group activities, because sometimes in the classroom, there's just not enough space physically at Pickering right now to like pull kids to one corner of the classroom. And that's, more due to like furniture and size of different classrooms.
So is it a room with a door, or is it like I would probably part of the hallway, or both?
Hopefully something with a door, because a lot of the times when we're pulling kids out there, it's for testing.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it would have to be something that would be quiet, so that it's like Chris was saying, if it's either for testing or maybe a reteach, they need that quiet area so they can focus. And it's many times that separate testing environment is part of their IEP. So we need to honor that as much as possible.
Is there any reason to be having groups out in a hallway, or a wider part of a hallway? Or are you better off with all rooms, or, mostly rooms?
Well, to what Jessica was saying earlier about the cluster meetings and awards and things like that, that would work for that. But as far as if you're referring to accommodations for special ed students or other situations, a room would be better. That's my opinion. Molly, I'm not sure how you've worked in Marshall, what that's looked like for you.
Yeah, so funny you should say that. We got over enrolled really quickly and we ended up like using hallway nooks for that testing.
So testing should be, so maybe if each classroom neighborhood had, they're all called so many different things, like a breakout room.
A pull-out room or
Right.
anything like that. But it's dedicated just for special ed.
Or a small group room, we could call it.
Yeah, and the
Mhm.
teachers could use it for planning, and it could be available for special ed testing. Do you ever send kids out to do projects, just on their own in like an alcove in the hallway or?
We have, well, at Picker, we just don't have the space to do that. I mean, we've tried. But back to the other point about that room, if we had a separate room for the pullouts and the testing of sped students, I was thinking if that could also be used as, I don't have a better term for it, for like a timeout room. If we had a student who was had an emotional disability, that would give them an area to cool off if it wasn't being used.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud.
A de-escalation room.
Yeah,
And also for when we do standardized testing, it's very hard to find a
Yeah.
room where we can be quiet to do the standardized testing with the students. So we
Yeah.
need something.
Yeah, Karen, that's an excellent point because we do have so many small group testing accommodations to make.
Yeah.
Jean, I don't want to lose one thought though. You were asking about hallway space, and one thing that I wanted to do at Thurgood Marshall, but we had to turn it into the drama club, was there was a space, and when we first moved in there, we wanted to make it like an 8th grade, like student leader privileged area where students could sort of come together, but it would make it that it would be their own space, but it was like really visible and right around, the cooking and the sewing and the health classes. But like I said, we turned every corner
Yeah.
into a classroom,
Did-
but the concept is really cool.
David, that was a space that was like the one at West Bridgewater Middle High. It
Yeah.
was literally like a classroom sized space that didn't have any doors or walls. But so I know we talked about this push in special ed, but a lot of people were interested in extended learning spaces, which we usually think of as alcoves in the hallway or, kind of nooks and crannies where people might get pulled out, or like that space that you were describing, Molly, where two classrooms could come together.
I think of it as a team room, like that classroom size space that you just described at Thurgood Marshall. That's an extended learning space.
Right, but it's open to the hallway, right?
Right. It's open. Yes, it's open to the
Yeah.
hallway. Mm-hmm.
So I guess that got a lot of votes, and like, what is that something that is important to everybody?
Yeah. Sounds like it. I mean, one thing to think about is, and as I hear you talk, Molly, about being over enrolled, so quickly, because you build it and then they come, and then so a lot of those spaces that then we're reserving as flexible spaces get commandeered then as offices and as special ed rooms or whatever you need them for. So there is some benefit to leaving something open because it's harder to then usurp it as a classroom. I mean, you can build a wall, but it takes a little bit more intentionality. So
Cool.
all right, well, let's keep moving along because we got other things to cover. But I think Jean, this is fantastic for you. We'll just have a conversation about these things and the questions that come up as we go through them. So then moving down, school as community resource, the idea of, the school being used after hours and on weekends, making sure that we separate it for security, sustainability, which is also a given, but the idea of building as teacher and how that sustainability is kind of kind of demonstrated to the kids or interacted with the kids and the teachers, display and exhibition, multiple venues, those professional work areas. These just appeared on one list, these ones with the 5 votes, professional work areas, and then the branding and identity using color and materials, and then the idea of borrowed light. Transparency is always a conversation that requires some real kind of getting into what you all are most comfortable with and where you get the biggest bang for your buck.
Great. David, I'll really try to chill out at some point, but so the picture in the lower right, that's what I envision, or we often talk about as extended learning, like areas to gather or do work in the hallways. But I do remember when we set up Thurgood Marshall that, oh, I don't know if we can supervise those, this and that. So I guess I'm still like kind of searching. Is something like this a little too much? Or is it something that will be helpful?
I love that space. I do think though, sometimes for special ed kids anyways, when you pull them out, and if I pull them out into an open space like that where other people are walking by, they get very conscientious of why they're out there, what's going on.
Yep.
So we have to be sensitive to that element.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then is there any reason to create these kind of alcoves for regular ed kids, or, and I'm not pushing it. I just really want to.
Dean, to be honest with you, we've never had it, so I don't know. I'm not sure how that would be utilized. I'm sure if it's there, it'll definitely be utilized, but whether or not it would, and I'll turn to the other teachers as well, whether or not it'd be something that we'd look as something expanding the way we do our instruction by doing something like this.
Right. Well, like I say, Kathy Latham was very nervous about being able to supervise it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I think you have to think about like when these are going to be used, because for them, like during class time, for teachers to pull them out. I mean, in the middle of classes, kids aren't like, they have 4 minutes to get to class. Like when they would use these spaces to kind of go to the side of the hallway, like when would they use these spaces?
Just I would say, so if you imagine that, right over here, where, I don't know if you can see my cursor, right? So right over here, there's a classroom. And it's got a window that looks directly out onto here. So this is just an extension of that classroom. And the kids are working on a project for US history, and they're doing a group project. So, the reasoning behind this and why a lot of schools are experimenting with it is because, one, it takes what would otherwise be wasted space in the hallway and makes it useful. We see a lot of stuff happening in hallways anyway, but it's not comfortable. So this is comfortable and attractive. But it's also about kids developing a sense of agency. And if they're going to be working more and more with more and more devices 10 years from now, which is 5 years after the school will be built, then maybe they're doing some self-guided stuff or some small group stuff. I think it's a little hard to imagine in a middle school environment, maybe with the culture that you have right now. So that's I think why Jean is probing.
One thing about middle schools too, just keep in mind when I see that is like, I do, and I had said this before, that I know a lot of teachers had covered their windows with things because the distractions and the social distractions of middle schoolers are so like, they are socially very distracted. Like they want to socialize all the time. And so just keeping in mind, like if there's a classroom and then there's a small group over there, they're just so
that could be really distracting. Yeah.
Just to keep the distraction, like the lower distraction kind of design in mind, just because I do know, I mean, you see a middle school walk by a window and like, hey, like they're trying to get their friends' attention.
I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, because I worked in a middle school in San Diego that had a lot of glass and it had areas like this. And a high school and a middle school. And it was a complete non-issue because there was so much transparency and they were used to it. It was part of the culture. But it's just a matter of whether you see it as becoming part of the culture, because this is a building for you all to realize your program. And I'm not minimizing that those distractions are there, because I know that they are. It's not around, maybe the intention is, oh, it'd be really nice to be able to do that if we thought they could do it. But I will say that I've lived and worked in buildings like this, and the notion, kids, when you don't paper over all the windows, it becomes just kind of like it's there every day, you know, it's like gets a little old.
Can
So-
I also add to that a couple of things? One, I agree with you, David. I think when you create a culture of where this is how school happens, yeah, initially they'll be distracted, but as they acclimate to the new environment, they will, come into what that is. We have to remember that our kids have grown up in concrete institutions, and this is an opportunity for us to give them a space that is 21st century, that is a different feel. The other thing with these hallway spaces, I think of the teachers as well. Like myself as a teacher, I would have loved to have been able to sit in the hallway in a comfortable environment with my materials, with a colleague at a table, or, where those two cubes are, to do some work in a space that just felt more like home. So I don't want us to, I 100%, Jessica, understand what you're saying. I've lived it. I've been in Lynn education for 37 years. I know. But at the same time, I also know that kids will acclimate to what we allow them to acclimate to, so long as we put the systems, the expectations, and expose them to what we want them to get exposed to. So let's try not to, let's think of what could we possibly give these kids that they would have never had.
Okay.
I-
So if we're breaking this big school into smaller communities, right? So we have obviously the classrooms. Sounds like we should have some enclosed space for planning, special ed testing, pull out. And then it wouldn't be bad to have some sort of space in each cluster or shared by two clusters, where it's more like this alcove down in the lower right.
Chris, you looked like
Yeah, Chris was gonna say something, yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Just on the glass part, I went to a school like in high school that had lots of glass, and like you guys said, like when it's the culture of the school and people are engaged in what the teachers are teaching, you're not really looking out and seeing the things that are going by. However, when we had a meeting today that Kevin led, and it was about the intruder drill that we just did, or the lockdown, and there is paper on every windows, and if there was a crack, the police are looking in, and they were noticing that people were moving around when they should be still. And it's one of those things, like design wise and culturally wise, like it would be awesome to have this, but we live in a society where people are coming into schools and doing things that they shouldn't be doing, that 20, 30, 40 years ago they weren't doing.
Right.
30, 40 years ago.
So I would respond to that though, Chris, so anywhere where there's glass, you can we can put blinds in. They can be sandwiched in between the glass, or there can be a blind there. We don't have to have big things of glass. It could be like 18 inches wide, a side light by the door or something like that. And the thing about it, I don't know if I mentioned it when I was talking before, like you would imagine that at Sandy Hook, that the new building would be like all concrete and no transparency, but it's actually the opposite. It's very hard to get into, but in the building, there's a lot of connectivity, because that actually more than anything leads to a feeling of high accountability, people knowing who's in the building, and also the biggest thing that happens, I'm imagining, in middle school is bullying. And so if there's eyes on the street all the time, there's a much higher level of accountability. So it's a balance, but I think, again, wherever we have glass, there should be a blind. There needs to be areas of refuge in the classroom during a lockdown drill, where you know where to go. So it's not all glass, it's just kind of where might we put it.
I just add that two things. One, I'm very impressed that Chris was listening during the faculty meeting. And, I agree. I do like the openness of it. And again, this is all going to be a culture shift, but we also, and I know we are, but we want to keep in mind the protection of the staff and the students should something happen where we do need to close those areas of view from the hallway.
Yeah,
I think a lot of times it's as simple as a piece of Velcro you just pull and the blind comes down, the paper comes down.
I would like urge you to like implement that, because that didn't happen in Marshall, and this has been a problem for years for us. And like, there's no really answers normally for what we're gonna do about that, or, and they looked into blinds, but they were never bought. So I would urge you to like definitely, because that has been a problem with the windows, and we don't have blinds, and there was never. So that's definitely something that I think is really important.
yeah. Okay.
That is something that could be added, right?
It sounds like it's important to do.
Right.
Mhm. All right, looking at time here, knowing that we're having great conversations, but also just wanting to lead us through a few more kind of conversations. These are all just sort of the last page of the design patterns. They appeared on one small groups, the greeting and gatekeeping and first impressions, the wayfinding and streetscape, sort of displaying school culture and being able to navigate easily through the building, breakout spaces, media center learning commons, which you will definitely have, and Jean will be talking to you about how you want that to function best, and then flexible science labs and connected also to STEM and STEAM. So any questions about that, Jean?
So the media center, we set it up as a computer lab and a library, right? But then Molly, you were saying the librarian position was cut, and I think you guys were rethinking how that space might get used. And you don't have to tell us tonight, but there's a lot of square footage that the MSBA lets you build. And so what's the best way to take advantage of it? Is part of it a maker space, part of it I don't even know what. But
Yeah, no, a lot of times if there is a makerspace, it is located there because the librarian is the person who kind of might oversee that program if you don't already have one. Another thing that schools are sometimes doing is taking the square footage from their library and putting it into some of those extended learning areas, and even kind of distributed libraries or areas of books that are connected to what kids are reading in their particular grade level. So that's something to consider as well.
So if you don't need one big room, David, you're saying let's take some
Well,
square footage here.
or you might take some percentage of that square footage and have
Right.
and use that as part of how you are balancing out the square footage, between your classrooms and whatever extended learning areas you have.
Huh.
The library is oftentimes a really great sort of heart of the school as well, and it's a collaborative area. We see them as really kind of places where your PD can happen comfortably, for instance, much more comfortable than the gym or the cafeteria. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I was.
Oh, no, go ahead, Molly.
Oh, I was just gonna say that we utilize the library quite a bit for like community partnerships, like or last year, and I think they do now too, but the PTO, or when we bring agencies in, we did a Shark Tank presentation in the library. So I leave it to, obviously it's the community's vision around whether you want to like distribute that spacage into, different sites, different satellite libraries, like David said, but I do think that there is value in having the library space for like smaller community meeting, a community meeting setting that's a little bit cozier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the CAF is like, it's nice, but it's very large. And sometimes it has a better feel and vibe in the library space. But
The
we were
principal-
looking.
Oh, sorry. the
No,
principal
that's
now at Marshall has just set it up to be kind of, she put like games in there, like Jenga, Connect Four, there's different spaces, and she's encouraging teachers to bring their students down for collaboration in the library, to sign up for times, and or even like PBIS, like rewards, to bring the class down for a reward, to do games and things like that, or research. So it is like a good space. I think I
Right.
do like the library space being fit like a whole class to
Yeah.
kind of, but it is broken up into some different areas, like a seating area, to higher tables that they could kind of play games and hang out, and she is encouraging that right now. So it is a good-
Jessica, could you fit a whole cluster in the library at Thurgood Marshall? Like, could you have 4 classrooms in there?
I think you could probably fit a whole cluster in there, yes. Yeah, you definitely could if you, but it's like I said, the long hallways are kind of more, but yeah, to do like, what do you mean? To do like what?
Oh, I don't know. You said like the student of the week or, you know.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
could
if you were
definitely,
doing it,
absolutely, absolutely.
how many kids are in a cluster?
Isn't it like
110.
like a hundred about?
Yeah,
A little
usually
more than
between
that?
100 and 110.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But Jessica, you're like, oh, it'd be kind of cool if we, or the way you use it now, just step outside. It's immediate. You're in your cluster environment.
Mhm.
We haven't had a
Right,
library in
you're
15
right
years,
there.
so whatever you do is fine.
Yeah, like
Yeah. Been
You're
down so
right- you're
long,
right
it looks
there.
like up
It's-
to me.
just come out of their classes and kind of just all come out, and then they can just go right back in. I do like that, but a different idea, that would be
Yeah.
awesome too.
Okay, but it sounds like it would be nice to still have this kind of more large but more intimate gathering space. And maybe not break it in, you know, maybe not distribute it.
Okay. So I've been taking notes, but I would really love for people to give a stab at this. Now, I don't have it. So you have to go to menti.com, and here's the number at the top, 28444813. And then I can scroll over so that you don't see this list, but this is just for you to remember what we just spoke about as these different design patterns. If people could share some of the great insight and ideas that we've been kind of discussing this last 40 minutes, that would be great, in your words. And we'll just make sure that they make it their way into the notes. I have been taking notes in the last half hour of things that people are saying. And if when you get there, you can just hit the heart so we know that you're there if you're at or hit the person. Anybody having a problem getting there? Good. Yeah, so the prompt here is really what strikes you about this list, what might be missing, but also we can just talk about each of these different patterns and how you envision them taking shape in the new school.
David, do you know that you're muted?
I don't know that I'm muted. I did not know that I was muted. Yep. Thank you. Jean, is this something that you will be thinking about, possible room for expansion?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Given what happened at Thurgood Marshall, right? Yeah.
Well, inside the building and also on the site.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. This is great. So I'm going to keep us moving along, and I'm going to go really quickly through just kind of a bunch of different what we call case studies. So just a little eye candy to show you some different ways that we kind of use guiding principles. So guiding principles are these like 5 to 7 big picture priorities that we're going to work together to determine for this project in just a few moments. But I want to show you some examples of those guiding principles and how they affected choices that were made along the way as buildings got designed. And as you know, there's lots of compromises that need to get made all along the way when you're designing a building and you're trying to meet budget. And so the guiding principles are those big picture non-negotiables that really help us to keep focused on, are we meeting our goals? So I'll start with West Bridgewater Middle High School. The rest are middle schools. But we've seen this school, but just to share the guiding principles, they really wanted school to be a community resource. So there's a really separate area of the school that can be blocked off. They were interested in STEM and STEAM, and just through co-location of spaces, they created a STEAM kind of zone within the school, no extra square footage. They wanted personalization, connection, and ownership. So they wanted those small communities, particularly for their middle school students, which are on the first floor of the building. They have these small learning communities. Adaptability and evolution, that spaces can evolve over time. There is a bit of glass, not a ton, but they wanted visible learning. And then there are lots of venues for display. They actually have their own gallery, and then outdoor connections. They have an interior courtyard that is used actually a lot. So here's the building. It was going to be a renovation, but the town, it was only a few $1 million more to do a new school. And that's what the town voted for. So here's that community zone. When you first enter in, you've got the gym, the kitchen, the auditorium, the band, the video, which is cable access TV, is all accessible in this community wing. And then all of these can be blocked off. So you can lock the doors right here. The whole academic wing here can be locked off. So it really is a community center. This is a really nice space here that they rent out. It's a beautiful kind of multi-purpose space, and it's open to the courtyard. And then they've got these small neighborhoods. That's where we saw those team rooms. And this is that neighborhood, the STEM and STEAM, right? So they have video, cable access. They've got their robotics. They've got a computer lab for animation. They've got their art classes, and right upstairs they have math and science. So just through co-locating this, they've got a little atrium. It's their STEAM wing. There's the science and the math classes right up above. And this is that neighborhood classroom cluster that we saw. And by the way, there's also bathrooms nearby. So, distributed bathrooms and special education rooms that are in close proximity. This is that atrium. This is their gallery. This is a big opening to their robotics lab, which actually opens directly out onto the interior courtyard as well. This is that very nice kind of multi-purpose space. It's got one of those academic stairs in it, and it opens directly out to outdoor eating area. Right up at the top of that, they've got this area that they call their cyber cafe. That's sort of like what you were talking about, Molly, with that 8th grade area. So this is for, for juniors and seniors. It's right outside of the library. And it's called the Cyber Cafe. They've got news on here and these high top tables, a simple idea that kind of feels different. And then here's that teaming area where you've got teacher planning in here, and then just flexible furniture in that room that you can extend out into. And they spent a lot of time thinking about their furniture, by the way, and going to visit a lot of different places and really carefully choosing the things that they felt would be both durable and also comfortable. They've got rocker bases on 80% of their chairs, which I thought was a weird idea when they first came up with it, but they really like it, and kids can fidget and focus. And that's the interior courtyard, local plantings, very easy maintenance, low to no maintenance. So this is the Beverly Middle School, and their guiding principles are school without walls. And you're going to see that there's quite a lot of glass in here, ever evolving. They wanted this to be very future forward, a sense of belonging and ownership that students would have to smaller learning communities. Small school feel, large school pride. So connecting to smaller learning communities, but also to the larger one, and growth mindset. So this is a middle school that actually has, it's got, I think, over 1,200 kids in it. So it's a good size. And one thing that is, there's basically a 5th, 6th grade program and a 7th and 8th grade program. And the 5th, 6th grade program takes place on the 1st and 2nd floor. And then a totally different kind of environment is the 7th and 8th on the 3rd and 4th floor, but they've got similar plans to them. And it's so each of those are located off of this. They each have their own large commons cafeteria space, the 5, 6, and the 7, 8. And off of that, like fingers, are these neighborhoods. So you've got all your 6th grade neighborhoods on the 1st floor. I'm sorry, your 5th grade on the 1st floor, your 6th grade on the 2nd floor, 7th on the 3rd floor, 8th on the 4th floor. And I'll show you what those look like. So this is that environment. So it's quite open. And then these are the neighborhoods that spin off of. So this is on the 1st floor. So this is the 5th and 6th grade neighborhood. And each of the neighborhoods are a collection of classrooms. They don't have a big space in the middle, but they've all got actually their own maker space, which is at the entry to this collection of classrooms. This is a district that actually did a lot of training around project-based learning and STEM, so they're very heavily invested in that, and that's how they thought of designing the space. This is a glass wall here called a nano wall, where you can close this off completely, or it can be open to that big cafe space. And it's just got a lot of flexible furniture and storage in it and places to plug in. This is that space here. You can see the movable glass wall that is often left open. There's breakout space in those neighborhoods between 2 classrooms. Not every classroom has a shared breakout space, but one set does. And you can see that it's accessible from either classroom or can be closed off from either classroom. So if you're doing some team teaching, and then there's each also grade level has a meeting room, which is kind of like what we were talking about, where teachers can meet. It's also a place for conference room. So it's planning, and conference as well. Here's the library. I thought they had a really nice solution for lockers. Actually, some of these are on wheels. But they're deep and they're square, so they fit backpacks and coats really well, but they don't take up as much space and they don't look as institutional. And this is the outdoor learning space, which is also like an amphitheater for performances. The Gates Middle School. So this this is by Doran Whittier, and the guiding principles are next gen preparation. And you're going to see there's quite a few open spaces, the kind that we've been talking about here. And I'm showing you these spaces because I want you to see what's possible, not because this is what you need to do, but just, you know, I can show you spaces that look much more traditional, but we know what those look like, right? So they're also very invested in project-based delivery. They have a middle school model where they're teaming across disciplines in grade level pods, or and then extended learning environments, differentiated learning environments, so that there are different kinds of choices that teachers and students have, and then thinking about long and short-term flexibility, which for them was a lot about also future expansion. So when you first come into the school, it's got this really kind of, immediately you have a feeling that it's like kind of not business as usual. It's just kind of this very simple waiting area with some kind of professional looking signage. Is this big enough? Let me see. Should I make, I don't know. Does this make it bigger if I do that? I'm seeing Molly peer in, and hoping that you can see it okay. So ease of wayfinding also, you come in and here's that heart of the school. You enter right into the heart of the school. And that's that big open cafetorium space. And it's got seating nodes and breakout areas as well. And here's that cafetorium space, again, that educational stair that we saw at West Bridgewater, which is a really nice venue for performances. That's a great place where you can probably, you know, bring a cluster together and do a meeting. And then you can see that it's connected to outdoor courtyard area, that eating space, so very nice natural light, good acoustics. And here are some of those pod spaces upstairs. So you can see there's quite a bit of transparency into the classrooms, and then varied seating areas out in the hallways with some light wells also creating some interior light and three-dimensional kind of connectivity. Here's another one of those extended learning areas. And again, you can see quite a lot of transparency and what feels like that environment that we saw, which was a high school. This is more of a middle school kind of example. And then they do have some movable walls between some of their classrooms. These are expensive, and but they're very good. When you close them, they've got a very good sound transmission coefficient. They're like a solid wall. You can get them in whiteboards or in tackable surfaces. And you would only put them in if you felt like they were going to be useful. So in every set, in every kind of cluster of classrooms, there's one of these movable walls between. So, you know, it gives you more flexibility. Here's one of their maker spaces, just very simple, not a lot of bells and whistles, flat surfaces, and pulling your electrical from up above, and just decent storage and audiovisual. And they do have an auditorium that they funded themselves, because it's not part of the MSBA palette, but they will allow a middle school to put an auditorium in. And then finally, the Fuller Middle School. This is in Framingham, Massachusetts. So they also were very invested in project-based learning. In fact, I worked with this district for 4 years with their elementary, middle, and high school, but especially Fuller Middle School, to do project-based learning teacher training with them. And so they knew that they were going to get this new building, and they wanted to really prepare for it. So they're very into transdisciplinary instruction and or cross-disciplinary instruction by grade level, wraparound student support, a sense of whole child, whole community, visible learning, a community and civic hub, and an adaptable space. So this is a pretty far out looking space, and this is an MSBA job. It was just completed last year, and so the entry, here's the entry, clear kind of entry sequence. the plan of it is kind of in this, like, you know, when we were doing the visioning, someone had this idea of like two hands holding, you know, clasped together, and that kind of stuck as an organizing mechanism for, here's the cafeteria, here are breakout large breakout areas at either end that can be used for project-based learning, and here are these collections of classrooms. Now the classrooms themselves, I think I have a diagram of one. Let's see. They have small breakout rooms in between them. You can see them right here. So here's a set of classrooms. Here's a small breakout room in between that are shared by both of those classrooms, but some of them can also be accessible from the hallway. And there's that central area, lots of natural light. Kind of feels like a mall when you go inside in a kind of a cool way. And it's got some of these fun elements. And then those rooms that are shared by the classrooms look out onto the hallway, but they're enclosed, and you can see that they've got glass there. They can be used as teacher offices. They can be used as small group rooms for the students. And here's what I was looking for. So actually, many of these classrooms do have a movable wall, not all the way across, but partial movable wall here, and then they've got that shared space for both teacher preparation, but also student use. And here's one of those classrooms. They've got this wraparound whiteboard, which is pretty cool. So in the corner, it just kind of takes the corner. There's a curve. And so math teachers really love it because there's just a lot of great whiteboard surface. And here's one of the small meeting rooms. And here's their one of their maker space and the library. Very simple. You can see that this has very simple neutral colors and natural colors. They also funded an auditorium. And then they have an outdoor atrium. So I do want to give us time in our small groups to do some diagramming, but let's just take about 10 minutes to do, and I think we can do this all together, to just do a brainstorm for potential guiding principles for this project. And I've shared my whole screen here, my whole messy screen, so you can see it, but I'll take notes as people are kind of brainstorming, and we'll see what we come up with. So what I've done is I've listed all the guiding principles that I just ran through as I talked about these different projects as a place to start. You can mix and match, make up your own, you know, whatever kind of you're connected. If any of these kind of feel like, oh, this would be a good guiding principle for us, we can talk about that. So yeah, let's see what, if we're thinking, again, anywhere from 5 to 7 guiding principles. Some of them are going to be related to curriculum and creating an innovative program, and some of them are going to be related to the building itself, things like sustainability or adaptability and evolution. So with that, let me see if I can grab this again. Oh, I don't know how. Oh, there we go. All right, so yeah, if people could just unmute and let's have a conversation and a brainstorm, and I'll take notes as we go along, and we'll see if we can come up with 5 to 7 guiding principles. I would normally have us get into small groups and do this, but I think we have a small enough group that we can do it this way. Who'd like to start?
Just some of my ideas that I was just looking at is, I really enjoyed the open concept of the schools. It creates a different kind of community and creates that transparency, and allows us to have a more modern approach that perhaps will create some of those cultural changes that, you know, we're not used to. We don't know, we've never had it. So perhaps that will help.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Dave, when it says visible learning, can you refresh my memory what that means?
Yeah, I mean, I think it means different things. I mean, visible learning could be display and exhibition. It could be transparency for where your STEM lab is, or it's learning on display, kind of like having. It's the opposite of having walking down a hallway and having paper over everything and not seeing any evidence of what's going on in the classrooms.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to say wraparound support, which links to SEL support, is a must.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Other thoughts? Dina, yeah. And you don't have to raise your hand. You can just like jump in. We've got a small enough group.
Okay, so I like the phrase whole child, whole community, and I think that for the Pickering community, we have kids that come from different like traditionally it was one sort of part of the city, but we have kids coming from different parts of the community, and I think it's kind of cool sometimes that different kids mix and mingle. And I think that looking at every kid being a little bit different and having different needs and their families having different needs, sometimes the word community, I think, is important going forward. I think we can't ignore that, our kids are going out into, they're going home and they're going to live in the community, and we want them to be productive in the community, but we also want to support help support parents. Like we talk a lot with parents about, how can we support you getting the kids to school? How can we support you understanding how we do things, the grading system per se, or whatever. So I just think the whole community is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, I like that too. Whole child, whole community. Other thoughts?
So what it seems like a recurring theme in all the times that we've met.
You're echoing, Molly, for some reason. I don't know why. Are other people hearing an echo? Yeah.
I don't know, so I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Okay.
I don't know
This is
why.
what happened. Deb, this is what happened with you the other night.
Yeah, this
That's
happened
so
to me the last
interesting because
time.
I haven't had that. But well, I think we can hear you, Molly. So just talk actually, and it's just it's a little weird, but we can. Okay.
So small school feel, large school pride. I think pride too just happens to be the guiding principles of Pickering. But the small cluster feel was a theme throughout our meetings.
All right, maybe it was a little hard understanding you there. So yeah, put it in the chat. But I did get small school feel, large school pride, small clusters. Okay. All righty. Other thoughts? Yeah, Dina had her hand up from before. Anyone else? Any other things that, what about things like school as community resource? Is that sort of relevant? I mean, it seems to also really connect with the whole child, whole community, but, and to the needs of your larger community.
Where did you land on visible learning? Or Deb?
I don't know. We were kind of like
when you.
I asked the question because, with the high percentage of English learners that we have in our city, and although Pickering may not have as many as others, that's going to change. When I think of visible learning, I think about how are we making learning visible and accessible for the students who don't have English as their first language and need it more displayed visually, which would mean like in the classrooms, ways for us to make learning visible for them, whether it's the whiteboards, the technology, the materials that we use. I don't know. That's where I was going. That's why I asked the question about what is visible learning there for.
Yeah, I mean, that could also be messaging in the school, about school values or learning goals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Data being
Mhm.
visible.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece that in the list, that growth mindset, I think as a district, we really need to be thinking of our students in terms of, we got them here, where did we move them? Because everyone where we got them are in a different place. And so it's not about everybody getting to the same place necessarily. It's about everyone moving and growing and having that growth in their learning throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
David, growth mindset, like how might that translate to space? I mean, is
well-
that triggering any thoughts in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, it's connected to visible learning. It's connected to, sort of consistent messaging about, what is important, what the culture of the school is. I think growth mindset implies that kids are learning to work more independently, to develop themselves, their confidence in themselves as learners, and to challenge themselves. So maybe some of those venues for some more independent work, kind of growing into that would kind of connect to that. I would also say just flexible classrooms and thinking about multiple modes of kids interacting with curriculum and content.
I think somebody
Music in the background.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying, is anyone else hearing music in the background? I was just here. It sounded like rock music. Is that just me?
Just you.
Just you.
Steve, were you trying to say something?
Oh, I was just thinking that somebody said in a previous, I think one of the previous visioning meetings about this, maybe leaning towards more of a high school type feel. Just sort of preparing students for their next venture, So maybe that there's some translation to the space with that growth mindset.
Yeah, the growth
Yeah.
mindset would definitely do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think phrasing it that way helps me understand, that it is going to be a little bit different. It is going to be a shift for us because I think, we're like the little red schoolhouse. You know what I mean? I think that that's going to be a nice transition for us to say, like, this is a middle school and you're going on to high school and we're preparing you for your next steps. And it feels like there's an investment there, and it feels like things are being taken care of physically in their physical environment. And I think that's going to go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's see. Just thinking about what we might be missing here. I mean, we have talked a lot about sort of a middle school, like the small learning communities. Do we want to say something about that specifically? We have small school feel, large school pride. So maybe that could be connected to, so we have clustered learning communities. And then we say something about connections to the whole, to the larger community.
Yep.
Let's see. I have visible learning here. I don't know if that's too bold a statement, or if that's something that we want to that feels. Can people see this enough? Is it big enough for you to see?
Yeah, I can see it. So when I see the phrase visible learning, I'm thinking transparency and, you know, walking down the hall and seeing what's going on inside
Right.
classrooms. But I don't think
Right.
that's where Deb was.
No, I don't think that's
headed.
where we're coming from. Visible learning. Maybe
I
it's
think
visible
Deb,
learning.
yeah,
visible
I'm sorry. I
learning
think that what
messaging.
Deb is talking is the environment within the classroom. Does
Uh-huh.
that help visible learners?
Yeah.
If I'm
Mhm.
saying that correctly.
Yeah. How about
Well,
we'll
it's-
say visible learning within the classroom?
Hmm.
Sorry, Deb, you were about to talk.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way to,
Is it just in the classroom or is it also in the school? Because
Yeah,
you're saying it, multilingual students who, you want the accessibility of visual learning, sort of.
Well, and that ties in with the differentiated instruction as well, right? For
It
both
does.
ELs and special ed.
Right.
But also like understanding the different cultures and different sort of, way, parents present in the office, like there's a little bit, I think this is gonna give us an opportunity to take it to a deeper level and, be more welcoming and be a little more understanding to the differences that, weren't there when the school was built and things were just a little bit different,
How about if we say called something like cultural sensitivity?
I think
then-
that makes more sense, David.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
then we have visible learning within the classroom.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now let's go back though to visible learning in the sense that Jean was talking about.
Yeah.
Do the Pickering staff that are on this call, there's been a little bit of discussion around that, right? When we were doing the discussion earlier. How do you feel about the transparency and of the walls for visible learning?
I don't have a problem with it as long as what I expressed earlier is that for safety issues, if we can close those or hide that visibility immediately, that's fine. Classroom teachers may feel different about it though.
Well, and I think the culture has to shift a little bit because of what Jessica's saying. I do think people walk by the hallways and wave in the doors, but if it becomes sort of the norm, they'll desensitize and they'll just pay attention to what they're doing versus other people.
So I wonder if this then relates to the cultural evolution, and maybe Karen, you started talking about the open concept. Maybe is cultural evolution, could that be a guiding principle? An open concept is part of it, and visible learning might be part of that.
School culture, right?
Yeah.
I think it's gonna go hand in hand. I think that when we can't, things have to be a little bit different. I think once we have a new setup and a new school and, there's gonna be things that are gonna automatically be different.
Mm-hmm.
And like Deb said, we're going to get more people, right? It's not going to be that smaller school necessarily.
Right.
It's going to get more culturally diverse, which will be a transition for everybody, the staff and the students.
Right. It'll be the best time to adapt and make that shift because it's new to everyone.
So is this going too far to have actually one of our guiding principles say cultural evolution, to be really conscious about that?
No, I think it's great.
I still keep coming back to, it's got to say school culture. Because otherwise I don't know what cultural evolution is.
Well, I think all right. I don't know if it has to say up there, but something about school culture here then.
Well, you want the building to reflect. Yeah.
Building adapts
Something new.
to evolving school culture.
A new school culture, maybe.
Are we using culture or as a double entendre? like the culture of different people coming into the community and the school
Oh,
culture is changing
yeah.
to adapt to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, could be. Hmm. And then, Molly was pointing out that making learning visible is a teaching phrase for accommodating English language learners. So, all right. Whoops, I lost her. There we go. All right, I do want to give us a little time for diagramming. So this is kind of a work in progress. Is there anything about sustainability or school as community resource that we would want to add? Because that's usually, those are usually the other things. Is school as a community resource, would that be a guiding principle? Because I know we talked about, Dina, and I know we talked about, like health wraparound services and stuff like that. So that implies to me that you want it to be a community resource.
That has a double meaning too. It's a resource for the community to use as a whole, but also to support the community.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a resource both physically and programmatically.
And I think that, being more transparent with parents and the greater community is going to be good in general, good for our kids. I think that, I think it's be more, try to foster a little more transparency, I guess, and communication with,
Yeah.
the community and the parents and stakeholders,
Mhm. Okay. All right. Okay. I do want to get us into our group. So we have two groups, and you're going to be either in the whole school diagramming group, and that's going to be with Steve Lamont and Jean Raymond, and then or the neighborhood group with Christina and Steve Watchhorn. So I'll check in about 20 minutes, see if we want a few more minutes. I want to respect people's time, but if we're having some great sessions, I also want to allow that to happen. So we'll be pushing the button in 1 sec, and we'll see you in your rooms, okay?
Thank you, David.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Am I sharing?
Yes, you are sharing.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the main drivers was to definitely have a community component. What actually goes in that is maybe still up for discussion, but gym, stage, CAF, perhaps things like the shop, the TV studio, band, chorus, some of community health, obviously because it's community. Those secondary spaces could also possibly be used by the community. Also to try to get those spaces that are used by the community and by all of the students more centralized so that the distances to the clusters are reduced, so travel is reduced, and also try to disperse the students so they're not all coming from one direction. Perhaps they're all, if the clusters are somehow wrapping around this central space, then the students coming to the spaces and leaving the spaces are leaving in different directions. So you're not getting, as we heard, 900 students going down one corridor at one time. Also some outdoor spaces that could be adjacent to the cafeteria, the media center, maybe art, things like that. All of this, of course, is dependent on what the site looks like and how much flexibility the site allows.
All right. Thanks. Anyone from Steve's group want to add anything?
No, except so in this one, right, the community is the center and then you lock off the clusters on to the left and to the right. But unlike Thurgood Marshall, which only had the gym, caf, and stage open to the community, the thought is that more pieces of the program could be open to the community and you could still lock off the academic ones.
Okay. Great. All right, group number 2, neighborhood group.
Okay. Let me just share my screen. All right. Well, we talked a lot about the grade configuration and how the 6th graders really needed to be on their own, that they are really a special group who just won't really do well if they were closer near to the 7th and 8th graders. So we talked about neighborhoods that, you know, a neighborhood that would be just for 6th graders. And we talked about a neighborhood that would be for the 7th and 8th graders. Although we didn't get a chance to really finish this one off, we focused more on just the 6th grade neighborhood. We talked about the integration of special ed and how that might look like within, you know, around the classrooms, and how we talked about breakouts, you know, small group being open versus closed. And so in the dark green is breakout areas that are enclosed. You can have a door versus breakout areas that could be open. So we talked about, you know, how the classrooms could be arranged, and not so much on, you know, a straight path, but maybe it does develop these nooks and crannies so that you can have these smaller spaces integrated in it in some way. And we talked about the big school versus small school feel and how that might help with that, you know, volume and design for the space. We also talked about the this flex room that that could be kind of, you know, off to the side and you know, accessible to sort of the whole neighborhood here, but also maybe it's accessible to parts of the school, like administration and whatnot. And then this sort of classroom, which Steve, can you remind me of the term that you used for this? Because I wasn't all as familiar. Is he here?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
like the fifth major.
The 5th major classroom is what we talked about. Yes. And you know, so we kind of sized it for as similar as the others. And so we also talked about the display and exhibition and how that might be integrated throughout the corridor space. And so we just did this sort of, you know, dash purple line to indicate, you know, that, you know, as we talked about before, the visible learning, like how that might be kind of filtered in through here. So, so yeah, it's a diagram, but it's a good start.
Well, it is interesting that the thought that the 6th grade clusters are different from the 7th and 8th. So it might be something we need to explore more if the district thinks that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if anyone from my group wants to share that some more, so Jean can hear it, would be great, because you did share some great stories about how you have your own dance for just the 6th graders because they're, you know, they feel a little intimidated with the older kids.
Mm-hmm.
Is everybody still here?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, Pickering is small and our 6th graders are tender, and the parents are very overly, like, you know, little helicopter, and, you know, we get comforted saying, well, they're going to be over here and they're really not going to be, you know, going throughout the whole building and mixing with the 8th graders. We even talked about proposing there be special bathrooms just for 6th graders, so they're not you know, just because it just would be better. But we talked about keeping that 5th major where, you know, Chris has, you know, the value of having that 5th major as part of the cluster, because then they're at the cluster meetings and they really, really get to know those kids. And right now, that 5th major person just borrows the room. So like, I don't know, we just talked a lot about sixth grade being a little bit of a different model, where the seventh and eighth graders are more of like, they can kind of do their thing a little bit differently and navigate, And I think it's because we do it, because we try and take such good care of them at sixth grade, that they build that confidence that when they look forward to moving up to the floors, So, I think that's important.
Cool.
Okay.
I'm going to stop my share, David.
Yeah, that would be good. Well, let's just take a group shot before we leave. Everybody say hi, cheese. 1, 2, 3. So we're at the close of this workshop, and thank you for staying late. We really appreciate it. I know it's been a long day for everybody, but I think it's been a great conversation, and that our design team has gotten a lot of great information. I know, Christine, you said in the chat that you were taking some notes. If you want to send me any notes, I'll try and incorporate them, or anyone who was taking notes, if you want to send them to me.
Sure.
But we'll be putting all these together, and your design team will be working with you to kind of dig deeper in terms of what they actually mean. And hopefully, and Molly will be moving ahead with the ed plan that connects to all these great ideas. But thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this. We really appreciate it a lot.
Well, thanks for organizing it, David. You did a great job.
Okay.
Thank you, Pickering
Thank
team,
you.
for
Thank you,
being
guys.
part of this. Very appreciated. Appreciated.
Yeah. All right. And have a great holiday, everybody.
Thank you.
too.
Yes.
Good evening.
Thank you. You too.
You too.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.